All right. Well, I am thrilled to introduce you all to Lisa Mickley from the virtual high school. She's going to talk to us a little bit about a variety of online offerings and maybe continue this conversation about what online could potentially look like in the fall, even if we're doing some online, some in person kinds of things. So, Lisa, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Erica. I would just want to say publicly what I said to Erica at the beginning of this 5 minutes that we've been online together, that I am so impressed with her dedication and devotion online, face to face, whatever it is. Erica is a rock star and totally devoted to JTEEN professionals, and it is amazing. I don't know what she's taking to give her so much energy, but I want to drink that coffee. um, it's really very, very impressive. I mean, every single session she is there and she has a question, and the presenter usually says, "What a great question!" and she is making it happen. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to
Lisa, that's because I bring people on that I want to hear from. This isn't about you guys. This is about what I want to hear. So
thank you for sharing that. I'm going to just say a word or two about what I do and then share some lessons with you. And my goal is to make this, to not make this a commercial in any way, shape, or form. So if you are hearing it as a commercial, just change channels and think that it is about different educational models for using materials. And I welcome you to get in touch with me at any time about those models and about how we can share the content that we have with you so that you can use it. I work at VHS Learning, which is an online provider of general and Judaic studies. They have been in the space for 25 years. They just had their 25th anniversary, which is very, very unusual in the online space. They have been doing Judaic studies for the last 6 years. I joined them 6 years ago after a long career in day school education. We developed 20 courses in the Judaic studies space. I'm going to show you some of those courses. But what I wanted to do today, I called it Jewish History, Musar, Israel, and more. I want to give you a peek at 3 different courses with the idea of taking apart an online course and applying what might be useful to you in your setting with your students. In other words, our courses are 15-week courses with somewhere between 2.5 and 5 hours of work each week for the student in the course. And I am not suggesting necessarily that you use those courses in your teen settings, but I am suggesting that you might look at them and find pieces that would be useful. Kehila High School last year did that with our Modern Jewish Short Stories course, and they just chose a couple of stories during a 6-week mini-mester. I don't even think they did 6 stories because there was an introductory week, and there, so maybe 4 or 5 stories and different exercises that we had provided they used during that time. They did not enroll the students in the course. It was really a guide for the teacher, and she shared it with her students in an online way. Our courses are asynchronous, so it is different from a Zoom class or the kind of online learning that we've been doing this year. And the reason I mention that is that I really believe that I think we will be continuing some kind of online meetings. I think we all like it. I mean, look at this conference, how inexpensive it was. I mean, I would love to be together with you. I would love for you to have prepared my dinner tonight, Erica. I would love for, to hear a concert together with my colleagues, to watch a film together as we did 2 years ago and discuss it. But if we can't, or if you can't get there, to be able to participate from a distance is just amazing. To not have to say all the time, I can't do that because I have a conflict, because the day is very long and your conflict is only part of the day. Our learning is asynchronous, so it is not in that space that we appear when we appear. Students can log on, can work in our courses at any time of day, and they can get their work done before the next week. But that being said, many programs use our work in a synchronous setting, in a face-to-face setting. They'll put some of the ideas on the screen, and I'm going to give you 3 examples tonight if we get to it, but if we get to 2, that's fine too. I'll be happy to share the other one with you afterwards. They put it on the screen, give the students a chance to have a discussion based on what they see. They open a discussion board or a Google Doc and have students do the activity that is in our online space. What I like about that and what I think that adds to the synchronous learning, the remote learning that we did this year, is it can continue between time. If your school is 2 hours a week, if your program is 2 hours a week, this is an opportunity for you to use the time between sessions and to have your students maybe working 3 hours a week or another 2, maybe 4 hours a week, depending upon what you think is appropriate for your students. When we run the courses, they are all cohort based. We have a group of students in the courses, a group of teens, teacher led. We always have a teacher in the section, and I would recommend that you have some sort of facilitator if you're using it in your own setting with your own facilitator, or we'd be happy to provide a facilitator. And they are paced. Paced means students have something to do before your next session. So we give them, maybe 5 lessons to do within a week if they take our full courses, but you could just say 1 session and something to do online, some deliverable, as opposed to self-paced, which means you have many deliverables, but they're all due at the end of the term. If that works better for your students, all of our courses can be done in a self-paced model, but you lose the ability of the interaction, which I think is so core to why we bring teens together and what we want to do. And that's really what we opened up with yesterday, what we were talking about. And I think it's important to remember what our goals are. So I just want to show you a few things, unless somebody has a question before I go further. Okay, so I am going to share my screen. The first thing that I'm going to show you, I'm sorry that I'm looking away from you. That's not what I wanted to show you. Well, sorry. I don't know. Because I'm asynchronous, Zoom is like always eluding me. Tell me if you see this page. This is our website. Can you see that?
We see where it says Modern Jewish Short Stories.
You still see that? Okay. Yeah. So I have to go back and do a new share, and then I will click on, okay. Now I'm in our website. You see the VHS Learning website, and I'm just going to show you the page. Now you see that, correct? VHS Learning?
Yep, now we do.
Okay, so I'm going to navigate in there a little bit. I'm going to educators in case you come to the website, curriculum, and whoops. And I'm going to click on Online Judaic Studies courses. We used to be called the Online Judaic Studies Consortium, and now we just call ourselves courses. And I just want to show you the courses that we have, and then I'm going to give you a peek at 2 or 3. These are the courses. Anything here is a hyperlink. You have in the swag bag or in your bag, you have a list of all of our courses, which shows you what topics each course talks about. And if you click on any one of these, you get to a page like that page that was showing before, Modern Jewish Short Stories, that has a brief description of the course and let me just move you, and a brief syllabus. You can click and you can see what that course covers. And once again, if you have a question, if you're interested in a piece of a course, I am always interested in sharing that with you. I went back, I'm going to do a new share now, and I'm going to show you, I had it open, so I should be able to see it, but I think I have to open it again. Like I said, this,
Lisa, while you're doing that, you guys, I just put in the chat the PDF that Lisa had just referred to. If you want to check that out or download it, you can have it right now.
I had it open, but it's a PDF that I can't seem to get to when I have, maybe it's because of this, when I have Zoom open. I have it open, but I just can't see. Okay, got it. So I'm going to open this again so that I can share it with you. It should be on the share now. I'm sorry that the Zoom eludes me, but like I said, I spend all of my time in the asynchronous space. And I still don't see it. I opened something called practicing gratitude. And I don't see a PDF in the shares that I get to it. If I have it open here, I should be able to share it with you, right?
Is it the PDF? Yeah, if you have it open on your screen and
Yeah.
then click share, just click on that document and then it should share.
Yeah, but I'm not seeing it when I open it on my screen. Okay, I don't know why. Maybe I have to just close the share and do it again.
Try sharing your whole screen instead of just a document. Maybe that'll be easier.
Okay, I got it. I think this is it. Here we are. Gratitude. Can you see that now?
No, we're still looking at Google.
Here you go. You got it this time. I'm sorry. My apologies. If anyone's interested in this, I could share it to you. This is an example of a instead of showing you a course and taking you around a course, I don't think that many of you are going to use entire courses. I pulled out a lesson from a course. This is from our Musar course. And we talked about Musar this morning, and we actually referred to it later today. Sounds like Musar, which talks about character traits, is something that we want to think about with all of our students, and many of us are working on different Musar courses. So our Musar course takes about 12 different midot, character traits, and has a week of activities for each one. You could choose, and we have had schools do this, 4 of them, let's say, and decide you're going to work on those 4 with your students. We had a school do that last year with a group of 8th graders. We had another school choose 4 totally different ones because they were relevant to what they were working on. And so we just sort of pulled those out of our course, and they used them. This is even more pulling. This is just pulling one lesson from our week on Hakarat HaTov, gratitude. And I pulled this for something that somebody was doing online last year to contribute to an online, it was called Jewett at Home, an online learning program that popped up in LA as a result of COVID and really had a national impact and offered many, many opportunities for people of all ages and interests. And so I contributed this, practicing gratitude, Hakarat HaTov. And basically, if you were using this in your school, once again, I'm sorry, I'm looking away from you. It's a little larger for me here. You would do a few things. First of all, we offer the students an opportunity to use a focus phrase, which is very much a part of the Musar teaching. And we give them a few that they can choose from: awaken to the good and give thanks, or all that the compassionate one does is for the good. They could use that and say it to themselves in a repeated way as a way to get into this Hakarat HaTov, gratitude week. The main activity is creating gratitude lists. And you can say, I just want to do that with my teens. I'm going to take that. We ask them to do it on 3 different days. Ask teens on 3 different days to type up a list of 20 things for which you are grateful. If you don't want them to type up a list, ask them to come in with a handwritten list. Ask them to send an email to their class. Ask them to post it on Facebook. However you wanted to have them do it, ask them to think about 20 things for which they're grateful. Or ask them to do it in a very private way, in a note to self. And then in your lesson, have them focus on what they think about that, on how they feel about that. And here we give them examples. The hawk I sometimes see in our backyard. I just finished reading the book Hamnet, and a hawk, which is actually a kestrel, plays an important part in that book. If you're having a hard time coming up with lists of things for which you're grateful, these questions might help your thinking, and we give them those questions. Once again, you could just send these out to your students, to your teams. What is one kind or generous thing someone has done for you? What went right today or recently? Think about an object, hobby, or experience you really appreciate. What are some special memories from when you were young? And then once you have done that, 3 days, reflect on your Kabbalah practice. And this is something you could do in a classroom discussion, or once again, if you felt it was private. In our courses, in our learning management system, we have what we call a PT, a private topic between the teacher and the student. And in that private topic, the teacher and student can communicate. I've had students take this course individually. I call it a tutorial with a teacher. And so the whole course is a conversation between the teacher and the student. But in most cases, it's a group of students and they want to interact with each other. So you might take this and share it among the students if it's appropriate. But if it's too personal, maybe they just write a note to the teacher, or maybe they just write a note to themselves and share with you something that they learned. Do you feel the practice of taking time to make gratitude lists has affected your life in any way? Were you calmer, happier, or more thankful in general? Did it backfire and have the opposite effect? What resistance did you notice to feeling and or expressing gratitude for something? That could be a discussion with a whole class without getting too personal. What role do you think God played in the creation of your gratitude list? Consider God's role in terms of both the items you came up with as well as the awareness you brought to it. And then if you would like feedback in this particular case, because I was sharing it in a program, I had them write to me. You could have them write to you. So you could take this lesson, and once again, I'm happy to send this PDF to anyone who writes to me and is interested in it as an example of what one of our courses look like. My intention for the last 8 minutes was to take you to 2 other courses. But if you would rather that I unpack them and just tell you what I was going to show you, if you'd rather focus on thinking about how you take a course apart, I'm happy to do that. The courses I was going to show you, one is called History Makers of Israel. And I have a lesson open from that course, but I don't know if it'll show up. One second. So I have it on my screen. So I'll just share it with you now. It's called the Street Sign Scavenger Hunt. This course, History Makers of Israel, goes through Israel's history through the people who made that history. So each week of the course takes a different group of history makers. There are politicians, surprise, surprise. There are poets, there are artists, there are religious leaders, there are resistors, there are martyrs, there are many different kinds of history makers. And the course begins with a street sign scavenger hunt where we're teaching our students or teaching our teens that you can learn about Israel's history through their street signs. So there's a brief article about street signs in Israel. You know, once again, everything that we have here is an open educational resource. So if you have the course or have access to it, it's not opening now because I think probably because I have the video on. Oh, it's I'll have to get it back. There's a new version of it that I have to update for you. I'm sorry. So each one of these is a clickable link, and you go to something. This is something called Israel Street Signs. It's something that we put together, and the students have access to each of these links. If you don't want to use it in the course, once again, you can send it out to your students. But the idea is we're asking them the following. Please read how to use a blog. We have blogs and wikis as parts of our courses. Once again, it's a tool, a pedagogic tool that you could use in any of your courses. The last lesson that we looked at, students were making their lists and sharing them with their teacher or with their class. Here, it's something that the students put together, and each one of them will contribute a piece to it. So post at least 2 comments to peer. What is interesting about the individual that made you want to comment? What about the individual intrigued you? Each one of the students chooses a street sign named for an individual who shaped Israel's history and then does some research. Instead of everybody doing the research, each student does it and they share it in a wiki. Those are just 2 examples. You know, once again, I'm trying to be very aware of the time. I'm going to take one more example. If you'd like me to show you, I'm happy to show you. It's from a course about Jewish history. And since I said we would do history, Musar, Israel, I'm taking something from the Israel piece of the Jewish history course. This course, it takes all of Jewish history over the course of 1 full year. So it's 30 weeks, 15 weeks on each half of Jewish history. But the last 6 weeks are 3 weeks on the Holocaust and 3 weeks on modern Israel. And once again, I was thinking a teen program could take the 3 weeks on modern Israel and just divide it up over 2 months, over 6 weeks as a mini mester, and see what they're going to do. The piece I was going to share with you, sadly, is called Conflicts in Israel. And it's a list of conflicts that each student learns about, or each student learns about one and shares it with their classmates. And we'd have to update that list, and we would ask your students to update it. Look at that list. It does not include last week's conflict. I will add that to it, but it's the sort of thing that your students themselves will bring what they are learning, seeing, feeling, and gives you an opportunity to talk about what's happening today. I know I went very quickly through many things, but my idea was to say to you that our online courses have content which might be useful in a variety of teen settings. If you want to read short stories with your youth group, we have a list of stories that we've already researched. If you want to share Israel's history with your youth group, we might, or with your high school class, we might already have a list of what you might share from that history, because you probably don't have enough time to do a 5-hour-a-week course for the whole school year. That is what you might find if you went to a high school course. And I'd be very happy to share with you what we have, to show you what we have, to find a model that would work for you, whether it be sharing the content, whether it be enrolling your students in a few lessons of the course, whether it would be pairing you with another school, which is a wonderful way for your students to interact with other students, whether it would be helping one student in your school who isn't exactly a fit. That student wants a Talmud course and you don't offer a Talmud course. Contact me, and perhaps we can provide a tutor for that student, or perhaps we can put that student in a class that's happening. I really would like to work with you in a creative, flexible, devoted way that will help you to bring the content that you're looking for to your students. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Anybody see something that you'd like to learn more about, or that resonates with what you're already doing?
I guess just real quickly, as far as a show of hands or just feedback, who's working in the youth group domain? Anybody on here? Shira? Matt, are you going to be taking on youth group stuff in your new capacity?
I will not be doing youth group, but I will be working with the youth group a little bit.
Okay, Alana too. And then what about Hebrew High? Shira, that's also you, right? Or no? No. Alana.
We don't really have one of those.
And Geneva, what are you?
We're doing like professional development programming and leadership development.
So is this even something, Lisa, just to to go to Geneva for a second, is this something that could potentially be used in an adult setting to use some pieces and parts of some of the offerings?
We actually have had some interest from adult settings, especially if someone finds themselves. I ran something at the day school I taught at called Schechter University, a little bit of a lofty title, but it was meant for the faculty of the school to learn something in an area that they didn't know. So a non-Jewish teacher, for example, took a Hebrew course that I taught, and it was really a way for teachers. So we have a course called Introduction to Jewish Life. If you have somebody who is not up to speed on kind of different aspects of Jewish life, that might be an interesting course. But we also have, and you can see them on our website, special development about online learning. In my mind, online learning gives all educators a chance to reflect on their practice in a different way. Our original professional development was all about teaching in our learning management system. Since COVID, we have developed numerous professional development pieces, and some of them are, just one webinar or a series of modules. It depends how deep you want to go. But one webinar for a group of faculty on online learning might have teachers thinking differently about discussions, about different pedagogic tools. So that's something that might be of interest. And I'd be happy to share you what we have on our website already and to think with you about what might work for you.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking, that there are ways to go in and look, even just the Israel signs, could you do a youth group event just using the signs and kind of playing with that whole concept? So, Lisa has presented, like, what you've seen is in its full capacity, although you've given different suggestions for just ways to modify it. But there's a lot of applicability, I think, that can come of it if you just sort of see a topic area that might be interesting to explore, to then begin to see how you may be able to play that out in whatever setting you're in.
Yeah. So, be in touch. I can share with you. You could have access to a course for a little period of time so that you can see if there's something in there that you'd like to use. And then
Oh, that's good. That'd be really helpful too.
we can talk. So nice to meet all of you. I'm sorry that we didn't do an introduction. The time is so limited, and I'm getting to know you by being in sessions with you all day long today. And maybe we'll even get to cook together later tonight.
All right. Well, I am so happy to be sitting here today with all of you, as well as our presenter, Billy Planer, the founder of Etgar 36, who is going to walk us through a conversation called How to Be Comfortable Having Uncomfortable Conversations. Billy, the floor is yours.
All right. Great to be here with y'all. I was so excited that I showed up 3 hours earlier to be ready to do this. So it's wonderful to be amongst kindred spirits, everybody doing this work, everybody who understands this work. So I am thrilled to be here, honored to be asked. And I want to emphasize this title of the conversation, this program, is How to Be Comfortable Having Uncomfortable Conversations. Because I don't think we're ever going to be having comfortable conversations. What's the point of that? Change is only going to come from discomfort. If only there were some uncomfortable things that I could refer to in the last, in current events that would create uncomfortable conversations. But Erica hit upon it, that during this pandemic, my business, a travel business, has been completely shut down. And I have this innate ability to, when people are going one way, I have this innate need to go the other way. And so when everybody went virtual, I was like, I'm not going virtual. There's just no way I'm doing this. And I got convinced by the Atlanta rabbis, actually about a year ago, right after the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Some rabbis were like, we need you to have a conversation with us about race. And I'm like, I am not the person to lead a conversation on race. Somebody who does not look like me should be leading it. And one of the rabbis said, well, really what we need is our congregation is split on this. And you have created a life where you have uncomfortable conversations. You seek out uncomfortable conversations. And can you talk to us about that? And I said, that I can do. And I gave a talk. I created a talk for the Atlanta rabbis. And then a rabbi who's been on a trip with me out of, I never say the name of their city right. They call it Lancaster, but Lancaster, the rest of us would call it Pennsylvania, kept bugging me to do a virtual talk. And I did it about this topic too, and ended up loving it. And that's what I've been able to do. But to get into the conversation, I am amazed at people who are able to plot out their life and tell you how they went from A to B to C and knew they were going to go from A to B to C. I'm the person that can only do that in hindsight. And usually somebody has to point it out to me, just like that rabbi pointed out to me, you create uncomfortable conversations. I never would have thought about it that way. And so if I have to think about how did I become such an advocate for having uncomfortable conversations, only in hindsight, I can now tell you the date. It would be December 21st, 1988. It was the night before my 21st birthday. And I, being a good Jewish boy, know that we begin the celebrations of our holidays the night before. So that night I was up at school, up at Syracuse, and my friends were going to take me out, but it being upstate New York, you do not want to be outside too much. So we went and did what everybody does, which is we went to a basketball game. Went to Syracuse University basketball game, the same team that beat the University of Kansas, Matt, in 2003 for the national championship. But this was 1988, way before. And it was at that basketball game that on the way to the game that we started to hear about a plane crash over in Europe. But we being American college students, we weren't thinking about Europe. We were here in America. And it was during the middle of the game that we started to hear that that plane may have gone down due to terrorist activity. And we started to think that, you know what, we have friends that are coming home from studying abroad, including my junior year roommate, including an old girlfriend, including friends that one of the reasons I chose Syracuse was it put me in close proximity to Grateful Dead concerts, shows, and I would travel to see the Grateful Dead with these guys. So on the way after the game, we're going to go to the bars, and we stopped at my apartment to watch the news. And that's where we heard about the tragic fate of Pan Am Flight 103. And I have to explain to kids that Pan Am was an airline like Delta and United. And we learned that there were 38 Syracuse students on that plane, including my junior year roommate, the old girlfriend, and the Grateful Dead friends. And that night, I was given a gift for my 21st birthday that's still playing out in my life today. And that is, I realize that I am connected to people and events that I don't even know about, because the tensions between America and Libya that resulted in a Libyan terrorist placing a bomb on the plane really started when I was like 13 years old and completely not connected to the world around me. And I started to think, what would have happened had that terrorist spent that energy and time getting to know the people on the plane? Could he have placed a bomb on there and harmed them? And that thought is rooted in the Torah here. We celebrated Passover about a month or so ago, and that whole narrative starts in our Torah with there came a new Pharaoh upon the land who did not know from Joseph, who did not remember Joseph, did not remember that our people and the Pharaohs actually got along really well. So when he saw how numerous our people were, he did something very human. He became afraid of us and acted out of fear and enslaved us. And that begins our whole Passover narrative. But this kind of deep thinking didn't stick with me. I was a senior in college. I had to figure out what I was doing next. And really what I wanted to do next, I loved summer camp. I went to Camp Ramah in New England, and I loved being a summer camper. And what I loved even more than being a summer camper was being a camp counselor. And I remember on one of my days off telling my friends, if I could do this job for the rest of my life, I would do it. And they said, that's called a youth director. And this is just a scene out of a movie. That fall, that September, when I'm on the Syracuse campus, I walk by a bulletin board, and there I see a flyer for the local synagogue is hiring a youth director. So I got a job as a synagogue youth director while I was in college, and you can track my GPA just going down as I got more involved in doing that. I cared more about that than I did my studies. And I ended up moving to Washington, D.C. after college with all of my camp friends. We all agreed we'd move to Washington, D.C., and I got a job at a synagogue in Washington, D.C. as their youth director. And slowly, while I was getting involved in planning the overnights, the sporting events, I started to see that I started to tweak the events a little bit to include this need to teach my youth group members about being connected to the world around them. And there sort of became an unstated understanding that if they wanted what they wanted, which was the free time on the overnights or the whitewater rafting on the camping trip, they had to give me what I wanted, which was 20 to 30 minutes on those events to have discussions about current events and their connection to them. And then by then I'd come back to Atlanta, was a youth director back in my hometown of Atlanta. And I took it up a notch. I started to take my youth group to a different city every year. This is in the 90s when travel didn't happen so much. And I started to connect them to the culture and the sites and the history of that city and how it plays out in their American and Jewish identity. And then in 2003, I realized, well, in 2002, really, I realized I'm in trouble. If I have to plan another Purim carnival, I'm going to kill somebody. Like, I cannot plan another carnival. I cannot plan another overnight. I cannot do this, what youth directors all know, which is take a group of kids in September and plan out a great year, a powerful year where we end up on the heights of May, just incredible programming, incredible relationships, and then start all over again, convincing them to come back out in September. I was like, I'm done. But I loved working with kids. I didn't know what else to do. What I really loved was that one weekend a year where I took them to a different city. So in 2003, I created this nonprofit educational venture called Edgar 36. And I take teenagers on a journey across America for 36 days, where they are engaging in history, politics, and activism, meeting with all sides of political issues to discover their voice and have uncomfortable conversations. So why uncomfortable conversations? By the way, this idea of uncomfortable conversations, but let me answer that question. Why uncomfortable conversations? Because, as I said before, no change is going to come from comfort. Why would you create change if you're comfortable? It's only through discomfort and uncomfortable conversations that we will create change and become active. So why? That's why it's important. But this is rooted in our tradition too. One of our fundamental documents, the Talmud, is really a discussion about debates and arguments. It's a recording of debates and arguments, the winning side and the losing side, because the organizers of the Talmud understood something very fundamental. And that is, what is winning the debate one day might not be the winning debate next week, 5 years, 5,000 years from then. And there's a great story in the Talmud that was really spoke to me. And it was about two rabbis, Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. And they were the Fox News and MSNBC of their day. They would just go at it, have blowout arguments. So much so that the story is, after one of them, Reish Lakish dies. And the students see how distraught Rabbi Yochanan is. So one of the students steps up to take Reish Lakish's place. And his strategy is he's going to agree with Rabbi Yochanan. And this outrages Rabbi Yochanan. He looks at the student and says, how dare you think that you can replace such a man as Reish Lakish by just agreeing with me? Do you not understand the importance of pushback? Because these two rabbis understood that you can debate and argue, but that doesn't mean you have to lose sight of the humanity in each other, the friendship in each other. And I think that they are teaching us a really important lesson, that when you start to have uncomfortable conversations, you got to start by making connections with people. So for example, on this trip, we tackle the topic of marriage equality. And we go to a LGBTQ synagogue in Dallas and get their point of view on the marriage equality debate. And then we meet in Colorado Springs, we meet with Focus on the Family, the religious right, and a man named Jim. Jim may be, and he knows this, the most unliked person on our summer trip, because he is talking about an issue that I don't think there has been a teenager on my trip, regardless of where they fall out politically, who agrees that people in the LGBTQ community should not be allowed to get married. Even our Republican kids on our trip, even Jim's kids, have no issue with marriage equality. He knows it's a losing fight. It's a generational issue. And yet he meets with us every year to say his point of view. And after one of the summers, a participant raised her hand and she said, Jim, there is nothing I agree with you about. In fact, there is nothing I like about you. And he looked at her and said, really? There's nothing you like about me? And she looked him up and down. She goes, well, I like your shoes. And Jim said, okay, if you like my shoes, can I be completely bad? She goes, well, your politics can be, but your taste in shoes aren't. He goes, let's start our connection there. And I think that's a really powerful lesson, that when we want to tackle important issues of the day, sometimes we think we have to start at big, big topics. So for example, if we want to talk about race in America, I just want to say that we do not have to, let me get this to work. We do not, there we go. I forgot this part. We do not have to start by meeting with members of the Klan, but I know somebody who did. This man, his name is Daryl Davis, and he is a blues musician out of DC. And Daryl Davis meets with my group and tells the story about how he has accidentally befriended Klansmen. How is a black man you accidentally befriend members of the Klan? I have no idea. But Daryl wanted to answer the fundamental question of, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? How can you hate me if you don't even know me? And so Daryl engages these Klansmen, and they have conversations, talk about uncomfortable conversations. This Klansman has been brought up believing that Daryl as a black man is the other, the less than, the not to be even thought of as a human being. But Daryl is a blues musician. He has played with some of the architects of rock and roll, including Chuck Berry, including Little Richard, including Aretha Franklin, including the Rolling Stones, Elvis's band. So they start talking about music. Then they start talking about sports. They talk about family. And all of a sudden they have a connection. And there becomes a disconnect here. These Klansmen start to look at Daryl and they're like, we've been taught that he's the other, the not to be dealt with, and yet we like this guy. So sometimes this disconnect can become so large that these Klansmen end up leaving the Klan. To date, over 200 Klansmen have left the Klan. And we're not talking about basic members. Here's the robes of the Imperial Dragon and Imperial Wizard. These are leaders of the Klan, all because they had a conversation. And here's other robes. When they leave, they give Daryl their robes and paraphernalia, including neo-Nazis here. And this is the power of what can happen when you start talking to people who don't look like you, think like you, pray like you, love like you, and talk like you. And in America today, vote like you. You all of a sudden take somebody from the other to another. And when they become just another person to you, maybe just somebody you disagree with, all of a sudden you have a connection here. And so we talk to the teenagers, and I want to start to give practical hints about having an advice on how to have these uncomfortable conversations, because I think it's so important and too easy to shy away from. So on the summer trip, the first 5 days is the civil rights piece of this trip. And I get I'm talking about teenagers, but as we all know, this all applies to adults as well. And so what we do is the first Friday morning of the trip, 5 days into the trip, in Dallas, Texas, the teenagers meet with Pro-Life Texas to tackle the topic of abortion in America. This will be fascinating this year because Texas just passed the heartbeat bill. And so we'll be meeting with the executive director of Pro-Life Texas. Most 99% of the teenagers on my trip identify as pro-choice. So their first meeting is with somebody they vehemently disagree with. And so what we do is, and this is the advice I want to give, the night before, we educate ourselves. So the first step is educate yourself. We have what we call a framing discussion, where the staff member will lead a discussion, get the kids to talk about the pros and cons of the issue and the vocabulary, because nobody wants to show up to a conversation ignorant. And then I talk to the kids that first night about the conversations we'll have the rest of the year, the rest of the summer, about what is success in an uncomfortable conversation. Because unfortunately in America today, we have set up the paradigm to be, for me to be right, you have to be wrong. And it's binary like that. It's either you're right or I'm right. And I try and get the kids to shift the paradigm of this to be, can success be just that I understand where you're coming from? Does not mean I have to buy it, because also a fallacy in America is, if I understand where you're coming from, it means I'm selling out my ideas. That's not true at all, because really one of three things is going to happen in an uncomfortable conversation. And when you are talking to somebody you disagree with, really all you're doing is test driving your ideas. And one of three things is going to happen. If I'm talking to Matt about, because you're just popping up on my screen, about football, and if I remember right, you are a Chiefs fan. I am a Minnesota Vikings fan, much more politically correct than your choice, Matt, but we'll talk about that later. But what's going to happen is I'm going to listen to Matt. And one of three things is going to happen. I'm going to be like, you know what? Matt has made a good argument here and made some good points. And I'm going to change what I think. Or the second thing is going to be, I'm going to listen to Matt and go, you know what? Matt has made some good points. And I'm going to tweak what I think. Or the other thing that's going to happen is I'm going to listen to Matt and go, Matt, I'm not buying what you're selling. I'm going to double down on what I'm thinking and what I feel. All you're doing in uncomfortable conversation is test driving your ideas. Most of us, when we buy a car, we take it out for a test drive. Why would you not test drive your ideas and values and see what happens when you hit a speed bump? See what happens when you hit a pothole. Do these opinions and arguments still stick? Or do you need to tweak it? And that's really what these uncomfortable conversations are. And I want to go back to the pictures for a second, give you 6 tips on how to take care of yourself during an uncomfortable conversation. These are a lot like when on an airplane, they tell you to take care of yourself before taking care of others if the oxygen masks should fall. That's exactly what these are. The first step, stay calm, breathe. If you do yoga or meditation, you're already there. But you gotta breathe during these. You gotta stay calm. Think about the vocabulary we use when we are in the middle of a heated debate. Think about how we feel for a second first. Your head starts to get fuzzy. Your chest starts to constrict. Or the vocabulary we use, I lost my head during that. I wasn't myself. Well, the way to stay in your head and stay in your body, breathe during these discussions and debates, especially when the other person is talking. Step 2, present your views and have a point of view and allow the person you are addressing to present theirs. This is not a monologue. It's a dialogue. And so is this. I'm going to wrap up in a few minutes and we'll open it up to the uncomfortable conversation. Step 3, question and push back on the other person's ideas and points, not on them personally. If we keep it about the issue, we will lower the temperature. And by the way, if you're having to resort to talking about them personally and making it personal, you're probably not winning the debate anyway. Step 4, reflect back on and use their statements and frame of reference in your pushback so that they can relate. Everybody likes to be heard. And if you're in education, which all of us are, this is called active listening. All you're saying when you're using their words and their stories is, I heard you, but this is still what I think. Just the other day, I had a former youth group. I call him a kid, he's 35, a former youth group member, get really frustrated with me. He's like, you're not understanding me, or you're not hearing me. I said, no, I hear you. I just disagree with you. There's a big difference between not hearing somebody and disagreeing. Step 5, everything does not have to end in agreement. You can keep it civil yet uncomfortable. In this politically correct world, I think we have placed a value that disagreeing is rude. No, disagreeing is not rude. How you disagree can be rude. But this is what former First Lady Michelle Obama was talking about. When she first said, when they go low, we go high, but then she amended it in the last Democratic convention when she said, going high does not mean you don't push back, but how you push back is whether you take the low road or high road. Step 6 and final step, calibrate success as being that the person you are speaking with has heard you and you have heard them, not necessarily that you are in agreement. A good friend of mine who is a teen educator, many of you may have hired him before, Scott Freed, told me this line once, and I've stolen it and used it mercilessly through the years. And it is, if I am the only person you hear saying this, then that's my job. Then that has been successful. So that maybe success is that you are planting seeds. You have no idea if somebody's going to agree with you. And by the way, Not everybody has to see the world the way we do. And that's hard for somebody with I have a huge ego, and that's hard for me to say. But at some point, I got to realize maybe not everybody's going to see the world the way I do. I think the world would be better if they did, but they're not, might not. My job might be to just plant seeds, and I have no idea when they may take root. One of the beautiful things about my summer trip is I keep in touch with the alumni. It could be 5 to 10 years later. I'll hear from one of them going, I finally got what you were getting at. The other day, I had this happen. It made me think about what you said in Dodge City, Kansas. I'm like, okay, that's worth it. I call it percolating education. I really haven't studied education on a on a master's level, so I just call it my own theory. Percolating education. It just sits in the back of their head, and perhaps it will come to the front when it's time. And I have to be comfortable with that, right? So why are people afraid to speak their mind? And I think it comes down to this story that a friend of mine, Eric, told me. Eric is a filmmaker, and he loves to tell stories. He loves to talk to people. And he was telling me this story about when he was on an airplane, and he was sitting next to Olympic gold medal winner Carl Lewis in the 80s and 90s. And he was talking to Carl Lewis for about 30 minutes. And then finally he asked Carl Lewis, what is it like to be you? And Carl Lewis said, Eric, this is what it's like to be me. We've been talking for about a half hour, and there is somebody 2 rows in front of us who has turned around. And he could be thinking to himself, I liked Carl Lewis when he won the gold medals for America. And look at him taking his personal time to talk to this nobody for the last 30 minutes. I liked him then. I really like him now. He said, but there's somebody a row in front of him going, God, Carl Lewis was a little obnoxious when he won all those gold medals in the Olympics. I didn't like him then. And listening to him going on and on about himself to the poor guy who's stuck next to him. So I didn't like him then. I really don't like him now. But then Carl Lewis dropped this knowledge. He said, but then there's somebody a row in front of him going, who the hell is Carl Lewis? And so I think Carl Lewis was teaching us this idea of the ratios. Whatever you say, 1/3 of the people are going to agree with you. 1/3 of the people aren't going to agree with you. And 1/3 of the people don't care about what you're talking about, aren't even going to listen. So if the ratios are the same, why not speak up? Why not say your piece? And by the way, I want to wrap up with this and open it up to questions and comments and uncomfortable conversation. I think we have to have the big conversations. It can be small conversations that make these connections. A year ago, right after George Floyd was murdered, and the protests started up around the country, and here in Atlanta, my hometown, there was some rioting also. And the Sunday after George Floyd was murdered, I needed to rest my soul a little bit. And I went to where I go a lot of times to contemplate. I went to the gravesite of, I think, one of the greatest Americans this country has produced came from my hometown, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he's buried right next to his wife, Coretta Scott King, in downtown Atlanta. And I was sitting there, and a Black man named Jack came and sat near me. And it being the South, we acknowledged each other. And then finally he said to me, he asked me, he goes, are you here because of what's happening in America? And I said, yeah, I am. He said, how are you doing? I said, not good. How are you? And he said, well, not good either. I'm really scared for my nephews and nieces that they have to grow up in this country. And we sat in some silence some more. And I just looked at him. I said, I'm so sorry. He said, what are you sorry about? You didn't do it. I said, I know, but I'm sorry that we're sitting here in this country right now, feeling this way. We sat in some more silence. And then he asked me, he goes, do you think this is ever going to change? Do you think blacks and whites are ever going to get along? Do you think America's going to move forward? I said, right now, I don't know. But why can't that be the narrative? Why can't the narrative be that we do get along? And we sat there some more, and then he looked at me, he goes, perhaps this is how we begin. I said, I think so. I hope so. We sat there in silence some more, and then I got up. I said, Jack, it was great to meet you. I'm going to go. And it being the South, he stood up. He said, can I pray for us? And I, at that moment, I was like, sure, I'll take any prayer. And he prayed over us. And I got to tell you, I'm not a very religious person. And this was one of the most religious experiences I ever had. And I came home and did what we all do. I put it on Facebook. And I got to say, I get that Facebook is trite. I get social media can be, but it is a place where part of America comes to talk to each other. And after I posted this story, it blew up. It got over 1,000 likes. I didn't know I knew 1,000 people. It got shared and commented on. And people were saying to me, this is the conversation we need to have. How can I have this conversation? I want to have this conversation. I said, look at the conversation. It was nothing deep. We didn't solve anything. All we did was be vulnerable to each other and be open to talking to each other. So I want to take the pressure off of us that we have to know, look, who am I talking to? In the Jewish educational community, we don't think there is a problem that we can't program for to solve. And the reality is there are some. And the best we can do is maybe just acknowledge each other and acknowledge each other's humanity here. And I want to end with this. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, at the end of his life, gave a speech at Cornell College. And he said this line in there. He said, people hate each other because they fear each other. And they fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they can't communicate with each other. And we can't communicate with each other because we're separated from each other. Look, we're on these boxes on a Zoom call. Hopefully, though I think there's been some positives with it. You know, I couldn't be at this conference if it wasn't for this. But hopefully we're coming out of this where we can be in person. So while we're in COVID right now and still in boxes, may this be the year, and we're coming, I don't want to scare anybody, but the high holidays are early this year. So we're coming towards the high holidays in the new year, 5782, I think, 2, whatever it, look, I came 3 hours early. I don't know where we are, but may this be the upcoming year where we break down the barriers that we have placed, not COVID, but that we have placed that separate us, and realize there is more that unites us than divides us. And we need to talk to people who don't look like us, think like us, pray like us, love like us, talk like us, vote like us. If we are truly going to build what we call the Kehillah Kedoshah, the holy community, or what Dr. King called the beloved community. And with that, I want to thank you, Erica, for letting me spend some time with colleagues here, with good people. And as somebody who works with teens, I am used to being told I'm wrong. So I am more than happy to take questions, comments, pushback, or agreement. Yeah. So I guess let me switch the view here. If you have anything, just raise your hand or start speaking, I guess. Or I guess it was good. I don't know. Maybe I finally got good at it towards the end here. But
it was that good, Billy.
I appreciate that, Leanne.
And I'm going to give a plug for your civil rights journeys that you probably, well, I know you would do for yourself, but I'm going to do it anyway because it was amazing. We flew in from Chicago with a group of adults. I couldn't manage it with kids the year that I went, but it was a truly life-altering experience for everybody who went. And it was right before we went into the pandemic, and every single one of them, every single day was like, thank God we went when we did. Look at what we learned. Look at what we experienced. Look at the conversations we can have now. It was really life-altering for those 40 people. So
I appreciate you saying that. Yes, during the academic year, I run 3-day civil rights trips to the American South for adults, for kids, for interreligious, for anybody that's going to show up with a group of people. We do that. Thank you, Leanne. So I'm just going to answer a question that gets asked a lot here. 2 of them. Well, one is, what happens when it's family? You know, and how I answer that is, it amazes me. So in 5 weeks from now, I'm going to finally run my summer trip. We're going to go this summer. I got 40 kids. We're sold out. Cannot wait. They can't wait. But think about what we do with teenagers. They're going to show up in Atlanta. 90% of them know nobody else on the trip. They walk into a room and assume they're going to be friends with each other. That doesn't happen. I don't know about y'all. That doesn't happen in my life with adults. I don't walk into a room going, I'm going to be friends with y'all. But I've heard friends described as the family you choose, right? But somehow in our society and social order, we look at our family and we're supposed to have this connection with people we didn't choose at all. And somehow this is supposed to be the people. There's a great singer-songwriter, and Erica is coming to the Capitol Theater soon, named Paul Thorne. He's out of Tupelo, Mississippi, the other famous musician out of Tupelo, other than Elvis. And he has a brilliant song title that I love. The song's good too. He goes, I don't like half the people I love. I don't like half the people I love. And the reality is with family is you do have to make choices. And what I want to get at is I have a nephew who is so far to the left that I am the enemy. I am not woke enough, nor will I ever be woke enough for my nephew. And we will go at it because my nephew is only a 24-year-old, 23-year-old recent college grad can be, has all the answers and knows everything. And God forbid any of us suggest anything else or have a more moderate view on something. And when we go to my parents, so it's his grandparents, for Friday night dinner every once in a while, there will be times I push back on my nephew. And there will be some times where I got to say to myself, you know what? Perhaps tonight's goal is just shalom bayit, is just let me give my parents and his grandparents the present of a peaceful house. But that doesn't mean I'm selling out. You know, I think we have to be careful of when we pick and choose. And I am not at all advocating for swallowing your voice, but there's times, and also the one thing I've learned is getting older, as I've gotten older, is not everything has to be solved that moment. That I can get back to the discussion in a more fruitful way, more positive way. The other point I want to make is this. How we say things matters too, very much so. So one of the first protests I went to last summer in downtown Atlanta, I'm pointing as if y'all are here, it's right over there, down the street. But so look, I'm a white male with privilege, and I've learned the vocabulary. I'm a white cisgender male with privilege. And by the way, I'm not giving up any of that. I find it interesting that people will throw that at me. I didn't choose where I was born or how I was born. Sadly, in America, where you're born, the zip code impacts everything, you know? But just like the kid born in places of your community that you won't go to, none of us chose to be born where we were born either. The question is, what am I doing with my privilege? Am I using it to bring others along with me? But that's not really the point I wanted to make. I am white male with privilege. I'm not afraid of the police. When I'm on a road trip, the worst that's going to happen to me if I get pulled over is inconvenient waste of time, and I'll have to spend some money. I get and understand completely that people who don't look like me do not want to interact with the police. That is very clear to me in America, and I understand it. So I'm at this protest and I see a phrase for the first time in my life, defund the police, on a sign. And I'm thinking, am I at the wrong protest? I thought I was at the protest for Black lives. I don't want to defund the police. I like the police. In fact, I want the police to be paid even more because they're good in my eyes. And so a Black woman next to me was leading the chant, defund the police. So when she was done, I just looked at her, I was like, can I ask you a question? And she looked at me, she's like, okay. And I explained exactly how I explained it to you, who I am and my thought. I was like, so I see that sign, defund the police, in your chant. Can you explain to me what it is, why you want to defund the police? What does it mean? And I was blessed by the fact that she took time to explain it to me. Because what I've also learned is that people who are marginalized or have to fight and defend their rights and their way of life, of who they are, I don't have to do that every day. And I have a transgender friend who said, do you know what it's like to have to defend and explain who you are every day to everybody? I said, no, I don't have to explain anything. And she said, it's exhausting. So perhaps have grace and mercy on us when we don't want to talk about this. I'm like, you are right. So I understood that that person I asked could have said no. And by the way, I'm not going to take it personal. It had nothing to do with me. But luckily, she explained it. I think it's because I approached it of, I asked her to teach me something. Instead of looking at her going, what the hell is that doing here? Why is that sign here? This is about Black lives. Why the hell are we talking about the police? Which, by the way, many people in America today would start their discussion with that point. So I think it's smart to learn how to engage. The other piece to all this is this. I think we have to learn. This is hard. I never really learned how to say this, but I've learned that my life is not, my day is not going to be impacted because somebody disagrees with me. I think it makes it more interesting. My parents, they go to synagogue every Saturday. They've learned how to Zoom. They love Zoom. They, in fact, are upset that they can go to synagogue now because they've liked not having to get dressed up. But before the pandemic, I would hear every week from my dad, can you believe the Schwartzes? They are for President Trump. My parents are to the left. They're like, can you believe that they think this, they think this? Finally, after week after week after week about hearing this, I said to my dad, yes, I can believe it. What I can't believe is you are shocked by it every week. He's like, but I'm trying to get him to change his mind. I said, Dad, they're not going to. You've been at this now for 1.5 years with them. Perhaps use your time talking to people who might think a little more like you, but might not go and vote, or are undecided. But we got to realize there are some people who are not going to agree with us. And so our fight is to keep presenting our point of view, because you never know when it's going to actually take root, but also realize not everybody's meant to see the way we are, but then find people who are closer to our way of thinking and talk to them. So this man, Jim, that I told you about, we disagree on everything. There is nothing. In fact, I find his views abhorrent to me, except he will talk to the kids. And so we have our relationship there. That's it. That is all we have our relationship on. And he wanted to talk today about the upcoming summer, but I knew I was going to talk with y'all, and I was looking forward to that. And I was having a good day. I went for a good walk. I got a good movie I'm going to watch after this. I'm into Veep, so I'm loving watching that series. And I was like, you know what? I'm not letting Jim ruin my day by talking to him today. Maybe tomorrow I'll have the energy to do that. But it's also picking and choosing when I'm going to have these debates and arguments. So, those are just 3 things I wanted to throw out there. And I get that some of the points are, I use this word a lot, I realize, fundamental to who some of us are. And some of the arguments, by the way, are attacks on who we are as people. I mean, I have had kids on my trip who are openly members of the LGBT community, who are part of that community. And I give them so much credit. Not a single one has asked to skip the meeting with Jim. And God knows we all know that adults would ask that. And they've sat there and they've engaged in civil discourse with this guy. But what they really taught me was they're not letting this guy define who they are. This guy just doesn't get them. Okay, there's 9,900,999,000 other people on this planet. That guy just doesn't get it. Okay, I'm going to fight to make sure that the people he wants to represent this country don't get there, that the people who represent me better get there. And therein lies the fight. Therein lies the battle. It's not personal against that other person, even though they may make it against you. And by the way, then I would say, how do you really upset somebody? You really upset somebody by not letting them get to you. Think about it. When you're trying to get under their skin, how do you really take away their fire? not let them get to you. This is what the civil rights movement did. This is what Dr. King did when they decided they were going to be nonviolent. It was a way to say that we are dignified. Your narrative is being from the white supremacists that the Black community is not dignified, doesn't have class. That's exactly what happened. It's what Mandela did when he went into power and did not change the national team's rugby colors. He said that's what they want. They're going to attack us for doing that. Let's not give them that tool. It's not that big of a deal, the colors. There are bigger fights to have for equality. And I think it's a brilliant point of just understanding your strategy when having the discussion. And just realizing there's some people that are not meant to see. And I often look at them and I think, I'm just, at the end of the day, I'm glad I'm not them, because the people who think vehemently different than me politically often deal in a politics of fear and hate. And that's quite a burden to wake up with every day, to wake up living in fear and hate. And I'm just glad I'm not that. So I think about that an awful lot. Any other?
I think Matt had a question.
Matt.
I did, but then I mean, it was back before this. I was just curious if you foresee any of these conversations and adjustments kind of being different this summer specifically, now that the teams have had kind of a year of all different kinds of learning, and some being in person and some not interacting in person with people, how kind of navigating those types of things.
Yeah. I mean, I think just the energy of being out and being free. Like my public health people, the CDC is just down the street that way. And I've talked to a lot of people there to help me come to, these are the same people who laughed at me last year when I asked if I should be running the summer trip. And this year they were like, finally, when I said all our teens have to be vaccinated to come on our trip. And one of them said, okay, you've mitigated then the predominant risk of what's out there. And then he said, it's feasible and important to do the trip. He said the danger would be not to do it and making the kids stay at home. And so I think the energy of getting out to do it is going to be phenomenal. But then to your question of, so they've been stuck on Zoom. I got to tell you, what's interesting is more so than to me, they're more used to talking to people that way normally, during the year. I had to realize it took me to change my mindset that when I see 5 teenagers sitting on a bench all texting people who aren't there, I'd be like, this is insane. This is rude. Then I realized to not to them, not to their way of interacting. And so I had to realize that's my shtick, not theirs. So I think we will have to spend a little more time going over how to engage in civil discourse, how to ask your question a little more. And it's what we do normally. But am I getting to your question or am I not hitting on the question? Yeah, okay. But no, I think they're going to fall back into it rather quickly. But also we're teaching them the whole skill, by the way, of going counter to the culture in America, which is there's no gotcha moments. So we teach them, let's get rid of hypotheticals. There is nothing that the man at Pro-Life Texas, the executive director, there's no scenario you're going to give him where he's going to be like, you know what? You are right. Let's go take my wife to a clinic. It's just not going to happen. So why waste your time? Each of you, now that we have a sold out bus, there's 40 kids. Each of you will get one question, make it count, and so don't go into hypotheticals and understand what everybody else has asked. So we get them to try and be active listeners too. So I think it's going to be fascinating. I'll let you know. I have no idea what it's going to be like with them, but I think the energy is going to be very positive about getting out and about.
Billy, how long is the trip?
So we have a 3-week and a 5-week option. The trip travels together. And after 3 weeks, we're in San Francisco, and some of the kids fly home and the rest of the kids fly to Chicago and get back on the bus in Chicago. So we skip the Dakotas and Montana and Wyoming, the beautiful states, but programmatically, it's not where we need to be, and it just takes too long to get back across. So it's the one window where the North and the South are out of school at the same time. You know.
And what do you do as far as technology on those trips?
So we allow the kids to use to have phones, but we tell them, look, there's a trade-off here. I'm allowing you to have phones. Most of them have been to summer camps. So they know it's not unusual to not be allowed to have their phones. So I say you can have it, but you can't use it during a discussion, and you can't use it when we're meeting. But otherwise, have at it. But I also then have learned to change my philosophy and my old schoolness, in that I'm now using the phones a little bit, in that, like when we're in Dallas and we go down to the Dealey Plaza where President Kennedy was assassinated, I send them all the link to the YouTube video of the Zapruder film, and they're sitting right where he was standing filming it. And I see them, whereas a couple of years ago, this would really hurt my soul. They're all on their phones looking at this. I'm like, this is amazing. You're right where he was. You're seeing what it was, and the street is right in front of you. And you just see it take on a whole new dynamic with them. But that's the extent of technology. I'm much more an old school person there's a lot of frontal discussion on our trip. And I expect them to rise to the occasion. Look, I used to make them do the debrief as a whole group. That'd be 40 kids speaking about their day. I got to the point where I couldn't even do it anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. So now we split into smaller groups. But I think there's a value in them learning actually to listen to each other and talk to each other, and possibly figure out how not to be bored during it, instead of programming for them. So we don't show movies the whole time. Every once in a while, we'll put in a movie that relates to what we're doing. When we're going to San Francisco and we're going to go into the Castro district to talk about Harvey Milk and his fight for equality, we'll watch the movie Milk on our way up the coast. But a lot of times I'm just like, you're on the bus. Look at America going by you, talk to each other. I'm not putting in a movie for you. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thoughts?
Yes, Alana. There is freedom. We let them explore. Where are you, Alana? What city?
In South Florida.
Okay, we don't go to South Florida.
Shouldn't.
Like,
Not exciting.
Well, we could be stuck there for 5 weeks talking about American politics and what we need to change. But like when we go to Chicago or Boston, we'll let them go like in Harvard Square and give them their meal money and let them explore in smaller groups. Or New York in the West Village on a Saturday night, they've got time to explore and go eat in smaller groups. So there is free time. There is free time, but it's not technically free. But yeah, where they get to explore a neighborhood or two in smaller groups. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I know we're wrapping up, coming to the end of time. I'll tell you this. So this past 2 weeks been brutal for American Jews in America. Where else are American Jews? In America, but about the discussion and debate on Israel. I mean, it's been brutal. I have gotten a ton of messages from people saying, you speak up on when groups are on the front line of hate. Why you need to be speaking up about anti-Semitism, and we are in the midst of this discussion with everybody. And I will tell you that I hear from alumni and their parents all the time that their kids, when they get to campus, are not afraid to engage with the Palestinian students on campus. They don't see it as a threat. They want to talk to them, and they'll sit and talk. And I think that's so powerful. It's the only way we're going to get past this, is to stop with all the easy slogans and the memes of, well, this group does this, so this group does that. but actually just engage. One of the summers, we were coming up to Lafayette Square in DC, the park that is right in front of the White House, now known as Black Lives Matter Plaza. And I love taking the groups there because I think it's powerful to sit in front of the White House and see random protesters. And as we came up, I heard drums beating. And I turned to the kids. I was like, that's the soundtrack of a protest. There's a protest. Let's go. It sounds big. Well, when we got there, we realized it was a pro-Palestinian rally. And so some of the kids were like, well, we're going to leave, right? I said, you've been on this trip for 5 weeks. What do you think? No, we're not leaving, but stay here. And I ran into the crowd of protesters, and I found some young pro-Palestinian protesters. And I said, look, I explained the trip. I was like, these kids have been on the road for 5 weeks. They're talking about all sides of issues. Would you come and have a discussion with them about your point of view? But by the way, this isn't just an argument or you yelling at them or them yelling at you. This is a discussion. They're like, sure, we'd love to do it. I said, well, here's the final thing. They're Jewish. They're not going to buy what you're selling here. And they did it anyway. They came, and it was a fascinating program. And the kids who protested the most, which by the way were the day school kids, some of them that day said that was really powerful to do. Some I heard a year or two later who were really mad at me. They said, you know what, that was actually really valuable. And I've thought back on that a lot. And so when they get to campus, they're not afraid to hear another voice, an opposing voice. They view it as an opportunity to learn about each other, for people to learn from them and them to learn about them. And that I think is where we're going to create the change. And so to wrap it all up, that's what an uncomfortable conversation can do. I don't know why we're afraid of complexity and nuance in this country. The important issues need all the complexity and nuance we can bring to it. And that's what will happen with uncomfortable conversations. So I just want to thank you all so much once again for allowing me to be here and spending time with y'all.
Thank you so much, Billy. We appreciate you joining us earlier this year, last year, whenever that was. Online, and we appreciate you coming to us through the conference, and are so excited that you are going to be busy and not twiddling your thumbs this summer.
Me too. I'm excited by that too.
I know.
So
I look forward to following.
Thank you all for all the work y'all do. I mean, each and every one of us, we made it. We made it through. Y'all made it. I sat on my butt on the couch. Y'all made it through. Good Lord. You should just be proud. That should be the whole conference, is just sitting there congratulating each other for making it through an impossible year. I mean, what could be hard next year? So congratulations to everybody in this conference for making it through. Good job.
Welcome back. If you're back, and welcome if this is your first time. I love that we have some spouses joining us tonight as well. I'm excited to introduce Danny and Zoe Person, who are from the Culinary Judaics Academy. Their session tonight is called Cooking and Conversation about tzedakah and food justice. Not only will we be cooking together, or in my case, watching them cook, but we'll also be learning about their incredible curriculum and the way that we can use it in our programs. All right, Dan and Zoe, it's all you.
Thank you so much, Erica. So great to be here. There are a lot of actually great and recognizable names and faces for us. So it's really fun for us to be able to have that happen in any class that we do. First and foremost, I will tell you that this is not a situation where Zoe and I are going to be talking for the next 45 minutes. This is very much a conversation. So I really want you guys to impart your wisdom while we talk about what we're going to talk about, because this is how we learn. We learn from each other. And so we're going to be talking about tzedakah and the different forms it can take, from the conventional to what we hope to bring to you and the kids you come in contact with, family, friends in your community. So let me very, very quickly give you a brief lowdown on what Culinary Judaics Academy is all about. I will preface that by saying we're going to be involved in the models of engagement on Wednesday morning. So that would be an opportunity for anybody to kind of come in and get a much more in-depth view of what we do for a 25-minute chat about the origins of the program and where we're taking it. But I will take about a minute now just to give you an idea of what we do. So Culinary Judaics Academy was born in 2000. I've been teaching for longer than that. I've been teaching since 2000, but doing a math, science, history, language arts program in schools all over Los Angeles and using food as the educational experiential vehicle to teach. And so it's a very, very stealth backdoor experiential way of teaching, making it fun and accessible and relatable. In 2009, I went to Valley Beth Shalom here in Los Angeles, talked with both Rabbi Schulweitz and Feinstein, and they were kind enough to agree with me when I said that I could take away the math, science, history and replace it with Judaic study, a Jewish values-based program woven into the fabric of cooking classes. And so we started there and have now exploded pretty much pre-pandemic to every major synagogue in Los Angeles. And we do work with camps across the country, Camp Ramah, Jerome in Georgia, Ramah Sports Academy, Ramah here in Southern Cal, and with schools all over the country. Pandemic comes, shuts everybody down, and we do something that we've been wanting to do for the last 10 years, which is pivot to an online learning platform. So what does that mean for you? It means that you get Chef Zoe and Chef Danny in 15-minute increments in a module-based platform that, and on your screen, you'll also see Chef Leni, who is the Director of Operations and Curriculum for Culinary Judaics Academy. She'll talk to about at the very, we have a present for you guys by virtue of you being here. So at the very last bit of what we're going to be doing, she's going to provide you with a little bit of insight about what that present is. But essentially what we've done is we've created an amazing curriculum that is in modules. There are 7 videos per module, and those modules go out to our schools, our synagogues. I literally, when I say it's for everybody, I'm not kidding. It's in senior citizen assisted living facilities, because what this programming does is it transforms Judaism from a place that is externally motivated, perhaps, or because the rabbi, with all due respect to the rabbis, that we don't want to be Jewish because the rabbi is telling us to, because it has the opportunity to transform our lives on a minute-by-minute basis here and now today. And so we pay homage and we talk about the 4,000-year-old history of this beautiful and wonderful religion, but we also empower our students, both young and old, to be able to use their Judaism on a minute-by-minute basis as they navigate and negotiate the minefields of their own lives. And so these videos, and more so the curriculum that has been written by rock star educators like Leni, enable the people who view our workshops to be able to make this Judaism part of their lives, and by the way, cook the most amazing food simultaneously. And so it is the best way you could possibly learn to either cook and become your best Jewish self. So what are we going to do today? Again, this is a conversation, so I want to hear from you. I'm going to ask questions. Zoe's going to ask questions. We're going to answer them, but we're also wanting your answers. Have you, show of hands, either ever uttered the words or heard someone utter the words, "That's not fair"? I think everybody probably would need to raise their hand. I don't care if you work with children or adults. That's not fair. I don't care if you're cutting line, right? It doesn't matter. Or somebody, somebody got the job or the promotion or the raise and you didn't, right? It's not fair. So what does not fair look like? On an individual basis, maybe it's something like that. But globally, what does not fair mean to you? If I asked you from a global standpoint, what does not fair mean? What would you say on the greater world level?
Distribution of wealth.
Excellent. Awesome
Distribution
answer.
of food.
Thank you. Distribution of wealth, distribution of food.
Water. Resources.
Water, resources. Excellent.
Access In
One
general.
more time.
Access.
Access. Thank you. Access. All really amazing answers and all correct. It's about not necessarily, look, when we think about it's not fair, how do we rectify it's not fair? On a global level, we're really talking about what?
We're talking about justice.
We're talking about justice, right? That's what making those scales more balanced look like. And so as Jews, we have something called tzedakah. And by the way, before I get into the Jewish angle, from a food standpoint, we'll talk about food justice. And you all just mentioned exactly what food justice is all about. It's about dealing with the inequities of the system, whether it be racial or economic, and your access to food. There are people that I have taught that have never walked into a farmer's market in their lives. They don't have access nor have seen fresh fruits and vegetables. This is an injustice. And how do we make sure this injustice doesn't occur? A lot of people give money, right? Money is a fantastic equalizer and great, but it is not the be all and end all. What other ways do you see that you could potentially, from a food standpoint, help balance those imbalanced scales? What would you say?
Food banks.
Food banks, excellent. In LA, it's called SOVA. There is a program where that you know, and I tell kids all the time, a mom's going to open the refrigerator every morning, or I'm sorry, on Friday morning, there's not going to be anything for Shabbat dinner, or a dad is going to open up that refrigerator and there's not going to be anything for Shabbat dinner, and they're going to go at some point to SOVA during the course of the day, and they're going to get a box, and in that box is going to be an entree, an appetizer, and a dessert, hopefully, and some challah and some wine to make kiddush, and candles, hopefully. That night, they're gonna look at a table and say it's a miracle, and the reality is you and I help make that miracle. So yes, food banks are essential. Any other ways that you think from a food standpoint that we could potentially?
Soup kitchen.
Yes, excellent, soup kitchen. So there's a place, again, I'll use an LA reference, called Hope of the Valley. Hope of the Valley is a wonderful organization, but they exist in every single community where they literally feed food insecure people on a daily basis. Hundreds upon hundreds of people that don't have access for any number of reasons. Many of the reasons we've already said. So we are going to make something today that is really super sustaining. And it's a hearty white bean soup that we have actually made at a local soup kitchen. And so I encourage you to make it, but I encourage you also to call your soup kitchens and see if it's something that you can donate. We also make a pasta casserole, which in a video that we're going to talk about later, you're going to see how you and your community can put together these casseroles and deliver them to your food shelters and food banks so that they can actually have it to serve to sustain people that are going through a hard time. But let's focus back on the Jewish now. So tzedakah, what do most people think when they say tzedakah?
A lot of people think of tzedakah as charity, but I mean, you and I probably think of it as charity. It's something we have a choice to give. It's a tzedakah box that you might see at your temple or at school or something. But actually, what you may not know is that the root of the word tzedakah is tzedek, which means righteousness or justice. So if you look at it as justice, it makes it a whole different word. So charity is a choice, and justice makes it more of an obligation, a Jewish obligation.
So we're no longer viewing this as, okay, I'm going to give money. There are different ways of creating this justice, and we've talked about them, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but I kind of want to move into the cooking. But what we do in every one of our workshops is we ask a thinking question, because when you view tzedakah, not necessarily as charity, not necessarily as giving money, but view it as providing justice, it changes the dynamic. So what's our thinking question? Because we're going to ask you, and we're going to ask you to answer it a little bit later on while we're starting to eat.
The thinking question is, how does the idea of tzedakah as a form of justice instead of charity change the way you treat the people you give to?
So Judaism deals with this on a huge basis. So initially, tzedakah was really when the farmers were given the obligation, had the obligation to provide for the community, they had to give the corners of their field, okay? And it's interesting, not the center of their field. It was specifically said that it had to be the corners of their field. Anybody know, have a guess as to why that may be?
For access.
Excellent. So why would access play a role? Why would access play a role? Because they could have accessed the middle of the field.
It would be embarrassing to go into the middle of the field to pick up the gleanings.
Yeah, so it's not only enough to give, but we have to think about the people we're giving to. So the corners of the field would make it as easy as possible for those who are getting, those who are insecure, to honor and respect them.
They're keeping their dignity.
Keeping their dignity. I didn't see it, but thank you. I'm old, I can't see. That's the other reason why Zoe's around. So keeping their dignity, so important, right? Because honestly, well, I'm not going to get into it because we're going to start answering a thinking question in a second, but you're on the right track, right? And then, by the way, it started to become something where it was money related, where these things started to pop up. But what I want to do is I want to kind of pivot from the only giving money to viewing it as this obligation to provide justice. So what are we going to do? We're going to start making our soup. And we're going to give you a cutting lesson today. By show of hands, anybody ever cut themselves? I got to believe cutting on a boat has to be the hardest thing ever. You know, I mean, it's enough to cut, but cut when they're all, you know, on the high seas, I don't know.
I usually cut myself when we're not in the high seas.
Okay. All right. Well, so today we're going to solve that problem. You are never going to cut yourselves ever again because we're going to tell you how and why that most people do that. And we're going to give you this keys as to how you can avoid it. First things first, I have a knife. Most people hold a knife like this on the handle, right? This is the wrong way to hold a knife, guys. You want to hold the knife with your forefinger here and your thumb right here. So now this is now an extension of my wrist. It can't go anywhere I don't want it to go. This is the correct way to hold a knife. You would think it's called the handle. You want to hold it on the handle, and it's part of your hand, but it's not. This is how I want you to hold a knife from now on. By the way, do this and you will see the major difference between how much control you have doing this versus this. Okay. Second thing, this hand. What does this hand do, guys? Ordinarily. While this hand cuts, what does this hand do?
Hold.
Onion.
Yeah, it holds the food. Very important. But you must hold it in a specific way. And this is the other area people get wrong. So Zoe is going to move the camera down. So I'm going to give you a very quick tutorial. So I have an onion here, okay? Now, round things are the enemy of the chef, okay? We want to create flat sides every time we cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a really great hack that's going to be able to cut this onion in a mere seconds into a fine dice, but do so safely. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it straight down the root, all right? Right in half, just like that, okay? I created a flat side. This cannot roll around, right? I would never cut this on this side. The other thing I want you to do is when you cut, you need to make a bear claw. So tightly together, down like this. Nails and fingers are down and in. As hard as I try, I cannot cut myself. Most people cut like this, or they cut like this. Thumb and forefinger pinching. I don't want you guys to do that. It is not the way to go. So I'm going to peel the outside of this onion really quickly. And then I'm going to show you how in seconds I'm going to get a really fine dice. Now, the reason bear claw is so great, and I will never cut myself. Who's ever seen a chef on TV cut an onion? It's super quick, just like this, right? The way they're doing that is they're following their knuckle line. So my knuckles will never, ever be in front, or it'll inform where the knife goes. So I'm going to cut down like this. I'm a righty. I cut from right to left. If you're a lefty, you're going to cut from left to right. What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to make small slits in the onion going all the way down. Then I'm going to, it's a small onion, so I only need to do one cut the other way, right down the middle. So now it's being held together. If you notice, I didn't cut this side. This is the root. The root is holding the onion together, okay? I am now going to take my bear claw. I am going to start to cut all the way down, and you're going to see that I'm getting a fine dice just like that. All right. So, by the way, anybody have any idea about the other reason why bear claw is so good? As you can see, all my pieces are same size. Same size pieces are good when we cook. Why? Who can guess?
Everything will cook evenly.
Everything cooks at the same rate of speed, right? So I'm not going to have a really huge piece or a really small piece. I'm going to have even sized pieces. All right. And when you are, even when you're not cooking something, you want even sized pieces because the mouthfeel, right? So let's say I'm doing raw apple. We just, for Passover, we did a charoset class. You want all these pieces the same size, right? You don't want a huge piece and a small piece. So when you're cooking, very important that everything be evenly, even sizes as well. So I have my onion. I have carrot and celery. This makes a very, very famous trio. Anybody know what that trio is called? Carrots, celery, onion.
The Trinity.
No, it's not the Holy Trinity.
Mirepoix.
Oh.
Mirepoix. Very good. Holy Trinity is different. Holy Trinity is New Orleans, right?
Green peppers, onions, and
There you go.
celery is the Holy
Thank
Trinity.
you, Sarah. Good job. She knows
That's
her
why I
stuff.
don't cook.
My husband's
No, it's
family
all
is
good.
from
So
New
yeah,
Orleans.
so if you were making a gumbo, you would use the Holy Trinity, right? We're making a soup. Mirepoix is carrot, celery, and onion. It's a French term. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cut, using our bear claw again, our carrots, our celery, and our onion. I will tell you that I don't peel my carrots. All right. Why do you think that is?
We want to keep all of the vitamins that are on the outside of the carrot because it's edible and it's good for you.
It is. We're all about, look, again, part of the food injustice, part of the injustice that exists in our world is that people are not getting the vitamins and nutrients they need. They have access to fast food, right? Jack in the Box isn't going to give them what they need, right? So you want to, when you have the opportunity to use fresh fruits and vegetables, use them to their greatest extent. So these carrots still have their skin on them. I've scrubbed them. There's nothing wrong with that skin. I would use it and I would use it to the hilt. All right. All right. So what I'm going to do right now is we're going to bring over a burner, which I have right here. I'm not going to go all the way back there. Oh, sorry. There you go. Thank you. You all can hear me now. And so I'm going to take the burner and I'm going to fire it up. No different than when you are preheating an oven. When you're baking, you want to preheat this pot because as soon as I get the oil in there, I want everything to start cooking. We're going to come up to temperature. I'm going to take some olive oil. All of this, by the way, you have the recipes that are provided for you if you're cooking along. I don't know who's cooking along, but Javlini, I know we've provided the recipes. And then there'll be a follow-up and you have access to the recipes as well. That's correct, yes? Yeah, she's taking care. So I'm gonna take some olive oil, I'm gonna put it in. Olive oil is fine to cook with. If you wanna use a neutral oil, you can as well. I don't have a problem with the olive oil imparting a flavor to this. It's almost like a very fruity floral flavor. It's all good by me. And I'm gonna take our mirepoix and I'm going to put it right into our pot, okay? And you're going to start to hear a sizzle, which means we're really cooking. So I'm going to let Chef Zoe give you one of our really fun and best hacks we have. We have fresh garlic here. And so she is going to take over and talk to you about, there's nothing worse than having to sit and peel garlic for a half an hour, right? First of all, your hands get all stinky. Second of all, like we got better things to do with our time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let her move this up. I'm going to move the screen over so she can see.
Okay. Like he said, we don't want to waste our time on this garlic. So all I'm going to do is take this garlic. Some people use a knife for this trick, but I'm going to use a spatula. It's much safer. So I take my spatula, put it right on top of the garlic, and I just hit it. And then right away, it peels off immediately, and I don't have to do anything. So it's all good. And then I'm going to take my garlic and just use my bear claw to chop it or mince it.
Right. So we're looking for, again, we're looking for a fine dice or a mince on the garlic. We want to, it's the last thing we're going to add because it's the thing that takes the least amount of time, right? So we want to make sure that we're not going to end up with burnt or bitter garlic. All right. So I'm going to give this a quick stir. right? Because I want all of our vegetables to be coated in our olive oil. You can hear that we're sizzling. What we're looking for is we're sweating these vegetables down, okay? So 70% of our bodies, 60 to 70% of our bodies are made up of water. 20% of that comes from the food we eat, okay? So again, in order to maintain health and be as healthy as we can, we need to have food that's high in water content. So where is all this steam coming from? All the water that's in these vegetables are being extracted, which is why when you get a big bag of spinach, it goes down to nothing because all the water comes out and all you're left with is the fiber of the spinach, right? Or mushroom stew, same thing. Same with this. So it's going to sweat down. We want the onions to be soft, not brown. So it's almost what's called translucent, fancy cooking term, right? So that's what's happening here. She's gonna get that garlic in about 2 seconds. First, I'm gonna season this, all right? As you're gonna tell, we're gonna season as we go, okay? And by the way, Chef Lini is putting instructions in the chat as I'm seeing. So if you have any questions, you can check that out as well if I move too fast for anybody. So what are we doing next? We're gonna start to add our seasoning. Salt and pepper, really, really important. Look, here's the thing. And those of you who are using garlic powder, that's fine as well if you don't have access to fresh garlic. What I will not use in my house is garlic salt, right? I am not a believer.
Very strong feelings about garlic salt.
I have very strong feelings about garlic salt. You will not find any garlic salt in my pantry. The reason being is I want to determine how much salt goes into my diet, right? Again, the reason that people are unhealthy if they're food insecure is because they are eating foods that are fast foods that are high in sodium, right? Not good. It causes hypertension and heart disease. This is just a very bad domino effect. And so what we want to make sure is that we're not putting a lot of salt in our own diet. Garlic salt is full of salt. I'm going to determine how much salt goes in. So
we have garlic herb seasoning.
Right. So today we're not using the garlic herb seasoning because Zoe's just cut up three cloves of garlic. But ordinarily I use a garlic herb seasoning, which is, I think Lowry's makes it. It's actually no salt and it's a really good product. So I recommend that one highly. So I'm just going to put some cracked pepper in. The reason I'm using fresh cracked pepper is when you use a fresh peppercorn, and you crack that, the oils get released from the peppercorn and gives a much higher peppery flavor as opposed to stuff that's already been pre-ground for you. So garlic goes in, and then I'm going to add, I like my soups to have a little bit of a kick to them. So I'm going to add a little bit of Cajun seasoning or cayenne, and not a lot, and that's going to go in. And immediately I'm already smelling all of these vegetables kind of come together. So it's white bean soup. Now, the reason I've chosen white bean soup is that white beans have the highest protein content of most any bean. White northern beans, black beans have a lot of protein as well, but white beans have a lot of protein. If you're making this for somebody who is food insecure, then you want this to be as sustaining, as healthy as possible. White beans are a great choice for that. So I have white beans here. What you can do, and Susan is doing, is soaking her beans overnight. If you don't want to soak, or David's doing. David, you're going to have the job later. That's right. And so I, in the interest of time, I wanted to show everybody how these could have been soaked overnight. Full disclosure, they are canned. So I wanted to show the approachability of this recipe, that you don't have to go with the fresh route. But if you are, that's fine. I do that more often than not when I'm making any kind of soup. But you have to use, takes 24 hours. You want to soak these to get them tender enough so that when you get them in, everything works out. So I'm actually going to add 3/4 of this. I'm not going to add all of it. And we'll tell you why in a little bit. I'm going to reserve a little bit for after I blend the soup. The reason being is, you can tell we're really cooking, right? So we've got steam and we've got a lot of heat going here. Heat will go down because these beans are room temperature, and obviously what's going on there is not. So we're bringing the temperature down a little bit.
We don't have to yell over the
Yeah,
sizzle
thank you.
anymore.
No longer yelling. So what we're going to do right now is all of these flavors kind of come together. I am going to cover the pot so that
You're
all,
explaining why we're
Yeah.
using those beans.
right. So I'm going to cover the pot so this come back to temperature really quickly. We are going to blend this soup. All right. You don't have to, but I like soups that are thick, hearty, right? Rustic. Depends on what you want to use. I have a fancy blender back there, like a Vitamix. You can totally do that and have creamy soup that came out of a restaurant, or you can use a stick blender like this, emulsion blender, right? And we are going to do that as well. And then what this is going to yield is a rustic soup that won't maybe pulverize or mix all of what's in here, but you'll see some of the carrots, some of the celery. And then when we're done, we're going to add the rest of the beans in, right?
We
So
like texture.
we like our texture, right? I like to go, you know, my wife says it's really great. She looks forward to the beans that are in because it's almost like little dumplings, right? That's what she calls them. I make this soup with lima beans as well. Hugely recommend that. It's fantastic, right? And I love lima beans, and they too are very, very high in protein. So, so if you have an opportunity, then there's nothing better than fresh lima beans as well. All right, so what we're going to do right now is we're moving on to the stock. And so actually, before we do that, we're going to add a even more flavor. So what I have here is fresh rosemary. And we're going to have to do a couple of things to this rosemary. First off, I'm going to teach you how to make sure you get all the rosemary off. Thank you. So that you see. So I have my rosemary here. It's one stalk. I'm going to turn it around. So I'm going from the top to the bottom. And I'm going to push from the stem. And when I push down, all of the leaves come right off. Okay? I don't have to sit here and pick each individual rosemary leaf off. If you just go from the top to the bottom, you'll end up with the stem. Now, what Zoe is going to do is going to give these a very, very rough chop. And when she does that, you at home will probably start smelling rosemary. The reason being is she's activating the oils that are inside the rosemary. I don't know if you've ever, you know, candles, vanilla, lemon, herbs like rosemary, basil, you know, they use the oils, the essential oils from the fruits and herbs in these other products, soaps, candles. And so she's activating those oils. And then we're going, now it smells way more like rosemary in here than it did before. And those are going to go in as well. All right. So all of this is going to get combined, our rosemary flavor. You have to be careful with rosemary because it's very, very strong. A little bit goes a long way. Like I said, that was a pretty healthy, and I didn't even use the entire stem, right? I used just half. All right, we're up to vegetable stock. You can use chicken stock, you can use whatever you want, but again, as we discussed before everyone got on, we are vegetarian / vegan, but vegan for the most part. We don't use beef or chicken stock or fish stock. What we do is use vegetable stock. Why is this?
Moral of the story, we don't use water.
Right.
Because water doesn't taste like anything, so we want to put some flavor in our soup.
That's right.
So whatever stock you use is good.
And by the way, we don't just use stock for soup. When I make rice, I use stock. I made quinoa the other day. I use stock. We made farro the other day with a great pesto. I use stock to boil the farro.
Do you make your own stock?
Yes. So again, it's very easy to make your own stock. Just take, I shouldn't say yes blanket. I do both. If it's convenient, I make it. If it's not, and I don't have any left over, I will, you know, I have grab one of those things. So they make really, really good kosher vegetable stocks. If that's not something that is something that you need to have be kosher, it doesn't have to. Imagine makes a great brand. And Trader Joe's actually has also kosher vegetable stock. I'm going to put this in now because I want this to start coming up to a boil, right? So there's the Trader Joe's brand. Both are kosher. I like to have the low sodium version. Again, you know how I feel about salt. I like to be the one. And so the stock, basically you want to make vegetable stock, take vegetables, carrot, celery, onion, the peels, the skin, the root, everything, all in the pool. Take some water, boil it, half hour later, come back, take the vegetables out. You're left with the most amazing, rich vegetable stock. And you could take that, by the way, put it in ice cube trays, freeze it, put it in a Ziploc, and then anytime you need it, it's in the freezer for you. And you just pull out a couple of cubes if you're making whatever, whatever you want to add some flavor. Now you have it easily accessible, just like that. So I'm going to cover this really quickly because we're going to bring this to a very, very quick boil, rolling bubbles, and then I'm going to lower it to a simmer, and then we're going to simmer it. We're moving pretty quickly here. Ordinarily, I would let it simmer for probably a good 15, 20 minutes. This is kind of a quick version of this soup. The beauty of soup, to me, is that there's so much flavor. I don't know if anybody like leftovers? I'm a leftover freak. I love leftovers. Yeah. Why are leftovers so good? Who can tell me why? Why do you think leftovers are so good?
Flavor gets to be immersed in it after a while.
So this soup is going to be great right now. Tomorrow, it's going to be amazing. The reason is all of these flavors have overnight to kind of marry and come together. And we're coaxing as much flavor out as possible. Zoe said layers of flavor. That's what we're all about, layers of flavor. So all of the rosemary, the salt, the pepper, everything we added, the garlic, all gonna play together in the pool, and it's gonna come out tomorrow as being better than today. We're all about patience and taking our time and putting as much love and care as possible. I will tell you just very quickly, the food we make in our platform isn't necessarily Jewish food, although we do make challah and we do make charoset. We're about associating any food, making any food with our Jewish lessons. So the same way, this is a great lesson on tzedakah. If we did our lesson on Gemilut Chasadim, loving kindness, I think, Lainey, correct me if I'm wrong, we made risotto, right? We made sun-dried tomato risotto for our loving kindness lesson. Why? Because if you've ever made risotto, you know you got to put a lot of love and a lot of kindness in to make it correctly. Right? It's not something you can do on the fly. Certainly can't make it, walk away, and come back 25 minutes later and expect to have risotto that tastes any good. So the point is that we use food as the vehicle to teach all of these wonderful Jewish lessons that are applicable in your life today. So we're going to let that come up to a boil and then lower it to a simmer. We have, my gosh, we are right on time. We have about 11 minutes left. We are rocking here. And we're going to take a couple of minutes at the very end so Lainey can share our gift to you. But let's talk about the answer to the thinking question. And again, we've kind of sped the lesson along a little bit. But Zoe, what was the thinking question again?
Thinking question was, how does the idea that tzedakah is justice instead of a form of charity change the way you treat the people that you give to?
Anybody? So we're giving justice to folks. How does not treating it like charity, but treating it like just creating justice?
Think about it as you're saying, I'm going to give justice instead of I'm going to give charity. How does it change the way that you're giving or that you think about the person that you're giving to?
It's on an equal level justice. It's like person to person rather than on high down below.
Correct. It's an amazing answer, right? It creates a relationship with the person getting that puts them on an even level with you. They just need a little help today. There's no different. We're not any different than the person who is in need. They just happen to be in need that day, and we're going to provide them what they need. So the dynamic between the two is changed, and so the concept of giving and tzedakah becomes different and changes, because it's now no longer something we're doing out of charity for this person, but we have an obligation to make the world a just place, because there's no reason that person shouldn't have, somebody used the word access, no reason that person shouldn't have the access you and I do. And our mission is to give them that access. So
Nina and John unmuted. I don't know if you wanted to answer as well.
No, that was a very good answer, but I did like it because justice seemed to have changed my whole mindset in a sense. There's a certain seriousness about it. not an intellectual way, just a very important humanitarian way. Justice seems more just to do it. That's what I liked about it. There's a lot more meat to it, I think, instead of just giving money. Right.
Yeah, no,
No more
yeah.
tofu,
We give the pun.
It's not coincidental that the word tzedakah has that in Hebrew has that meaning as opposed to charity, because it is the quintessential Jewish paradigm, right? 18 times in the book of Deuteronomy, we are told about justice for the poor, the widow, the orphan, the stranger. And the rationale for it is because you remember what it was like to be the stranger in Egypt, right? We put ourselves in that place. Remember when we were that people, and there was someone there to offer us justice. So here it is, and in many ways we're actually commanded to be godlike.
Yeah, and by the way, we could be there again,
and have been.
Yeah, right. We have been, right, and so it's a situation where we're looking at that and saying we have to be fair and kind to this individual because we've been there and we can go back at any point in time. The act of giving, actually in the Torah, it tells us that the person giving is getting as much as the person getting, because of how it makes us feel, that we're contributing. But I will tell you that this is where it's beautiful that a 4,000-year religion can be applicable to 2021. Doctors and scientists have actually have data that indicates that the act of giving actually yields a more healthy body. Your own body will receive health benefits from the act of giving. And so, but plus the fact, Rabbi, the best giving is anonymous giving. Yes, the reason why is that? And then we'll go back to again, what we talked about in terms of why not the center of the field but the corners of the field. Why is anonymous giving the best kind of giving?
Well, in the Rambam's ladder of tzedakah, the nuances of difference have to do with dignity.
Yeah, right. So we're thinking of the individual who's getting and understanding that they deserve that respect. And more often than not, there are people that won't ask because they might be too embarrassed to ask, because they might know who's giving. And if they don't know who's giving, then we need them to ask.
Right. But an anonymity removes that sense of hierarchy, right? That exactly. They gave me, they're better than me.
Exactly. So by removing that, we're removing that impediment for them to ask. And thankful, and that's what we need. We need them to do.
So when you teach the corners piece again, I'm gonna throw in a little piece.
Please. We're all about learning.
The tells us that we're supposed to leave the corners of our field.
Yeah.
It doesn't give us a specific measure of what makes a corner.
Okay.
So presumably there were those who left larger corners and those who left smaller corners, because there is a certain sense of you have an obligation, but how far you take the obligation is also a measure of your own heart.
I love it. Fantastic. And in an ideal world, we all have huge corners.
Right, huge corners.
Huge corners. We want those corners. All right, so what we're going to do right now is we are going to blend this soup. And the way I'm going to do that is through my stick blender. It's really hot. Here's the thing you have to know about blending soup, especially if you're going to do it in a stand-up blender. You need to, grab that for me, please. You need to absolutely take a towel. It's kind of like a volcano. It's going to want to come up and bite you, right? And so when you put the soup in, you put this on, and I need you to hold this down really hard, and you want to put it on the lowest possible setting and pulse it. And then once you pulsed it, then you can throw it up a little bit higher, and then it will blend the soup. Because again, that hot air, that liquid wants to come up, and the last thing you want to do is have this thing flying off and hot soup going everywhere. In terms of this, you want to keep this below the surface of the liquid, right? If anytime you bring this up above, then it's going to fly everywhere. I'm not going to blend this long because again, I like rustic, right? So you're not going to hear me for a second, and I'm just going to very quickly do this. And you're going to see again how quickly this happens. And that quickly we are done. Okay. So I could let this simmer for a little while longer, but in the interest of time, I'm going to serve us up. And while I serve us, I'm going to let Chef Lini talk to you about our gift. Oh, Chef Zoe just reminded me. I'm going to add in the rest of our beans, right? Because we're wanting that texture.
We want our dumplings.
Right, we want our dumplings. And so I'm going to add those in. The soup is super hot, so it's going to make those beans pretty hot pretty quickly. And then we're going to serve. Really crusty bread or challah on Friday night is we have two pieces of challah. The challah we eat and the challah we what?
The challah we dip in our soup.
Right, we have dipping pieces. That's what we call them. So this makes for really, really good dipping. So Chef Lini, I'll hand it over to you while we serve up on this end.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chef Danny and I were talking earlier today about a gift that we could give y'all for joining us tonight. And we thought a great way to kind of to keep the party going is to give you free access to our digital video workshop, which basically is a shortened version of what you just saw with a couple additions. One, Chef Danny and Chef Zoe go through how to also make the pasta casserole that they mentioned before. So it's a really great budget friendly and chef of all level friendly way to contribute to food pantries. And also Chef Danny and Chef Zoe talk about their experience doing it with their larger synagogue. And it also comes with our supplemental curriculum. So going more into depth about the Jewish pieces that Chef Danny and Chef Zoe talked about today. And so I will put in the chat the link. And so basically all you need to do is put in your email address and you'll basically just make a free account and then you'll get access to this digital video along with a supplemental curriculum. It's kind of like a taste of what our digital workshops are like. So I'll go ahead and put that in.
Thank you. All right, so I'm very quickly going to show you what the soup looks like, the consistency. Let me see if I can grab that. So you're seeing it's, let's see if I can get even closer. You all can see that?
Mm-hmm.
There you go. And so I like it thick. The more beans you put in, the thicker it's going to get. And so, you know, and obviously the more broth you're putting in, the thinner. I like a hearty thick soup. So thank you for joining us. Again, we are going to do the models of engagement that are going to give you a little bit more background about the program, but know that the supplemental curriculum that Chef Lini is going to be sharing with you is really indicative of the fact that it can be applied to any age, right? So it's just a matter of the levels of critical thinking that you're doing with the students and making it age appropriate. As I said, we've done this with super young and all the way through senior citizens. And it's truly empowering to watch the effects that the curriculum has on those who are receiving it. So you got a little bit of a quote unquote taste today. And so thank you so much. We're at 6:30 on the nose. If anybody has any comments or questions or anything of that nature, I'm happy to answer it. We're going to take a very quick you got to eat at the end of every cooking show. I'm sorry, that's just the rule. So I know what we're having for dinner. And so it's dinner time here. So it's the perfect season.
What happened to the tofu?
So the tofu was optional, so we decided not to. But the beauty of this, the tofu, is that it puts in massive amounts of protein into a soup. So if you are vegetarian or vegan and you want to put more protein into the soup, I've had actually moms who couldn't get their kids to eat. And I've done this where I put soft silken tofu in, and when you blend it, tofu is wonderful because it takes on whatever flavor you're cooking with, right? So it has no flavor. So it's not going to add any additional flavor. It's going to take on the flavor of the soup, but it's going to, it's going to make it look like you put cream in it because and it's non-dairy, obviously. So it's very creamy. And B, it is going to be packed with protein. I would deal with soft silken tofu as opposed to the firmer variety because it will blend much more easily. And again, I will tell you, you will not be able to even see it in there. It's hidden. It's a hidden gem within the soup. So Arnie, thanks for mentioning that. I appreciate it.
I cooked with you in spite of my disposal being fixed as I'm doing it.
Okay, good.
It looks delicious, but I have a question for you. If I'm going to add the milk, do I have to worry about it curdling, or do I have to add it in any specific way?
No, I would just add it, blend it. You know, you can add cream at the end or milk at the end, and it'll just again add that extra richness.
That's my disposal, and there's my soup. It looks
there you
great.
go. Look at that. That is a super spot. Here's the thing. What's great is that this soup freezes amazingly well. So you could literally take this, eat what you want, and then throw it into a container, into your freezer, and 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, pull it out, defrost it, bring it up to temperature, and it'll be as if you made it that day. So it totally freezes well. Just not longer than 2 months. You should never actually have anything in your freezer longer than 2 months because they start taking on flavors of everything else in your freezer, which is not something we want. Which is why when your water tastes bad, it's not your water, it's your ice cubes. So there you go. Last helpful hint of the day. We hope you had a good time. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was really, really great to be with you. I totally admire and thank you for what you guys do as Jewish educators. It's important, and thank you. I hope you join us for the Models of Engagement on Wednesday to learn a little bit more. And thanks for coming. I hope you enjoy the gift that we're going to provide.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Great. I'm hungry.
Too.
Thank you so much, Danny and Zoe and Leanie. Do you have to have an E sound at the after your name to work together? Thank you so much. Not only did you make delicious food and teach us a beautiful lesson and demonstrate how this could work in our homes and in our programs, but you guys are adorable to watch and listen to. So winning combination, you two.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.